Hi, Virgo, Sun and Rising. Welcome to your November 2021 Astro Update. It's Raina here. So, in October, your ruler Mercury went direct on October 18th to be exact. And, it does take time after a planet goes direct for it to come out of its shadow, to come back to the degree it was before it retrograded. I think that in the case of Mercury, it's going to be like the 8th of November, I think. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it's even less than that. But on the 4th of the month, the new moon is going to be at 12 degrees of Scorpio. And for you, Scorpio is the third house, and the third house in the universal chart is Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So there's a connection with Mercury. Mercury is the ruler of the third house. Okay, so this is where some of the energy is concentrated, especially as we begin the month of November. And because this is your ruler, because this is the house of your ruler, this becomes more important for you in terms of maybe the progress that you're making in your life. This can be something to do with teaching, learning. So if you are in the education field and you're looking for work, this may be the time when things start to open up for you. Or if you want to learn a new skill, this can be a good time for that. And there's going to be, in 2022, when there are eclipses that happen in Scorpio, they will trigger this particular house. And even the eclipse this month in Taurus will affect this house because it will form an opposition. But I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to start with the beginning of the month. I don't know if any of you are planning to move or have moved, because this can be your local area. So there might be some new local area. Maybe you have not moved yet because the fourth house is connected to real estate matters or home matters. And that's going to be an area where you have a solar eclipse, Virgo. So that could certainly affect your living situation then. However, sometimes eclipses are felt even before that date. So maybe November is the time when some of you do it. And who knows, maybe it'll even be at this, on the spur of the moment. It's not going to be something necessarily that you have planned out months in advance, that you get some opportunity and you run with it. But on the next day after that new moon, on the 5th, Venus goes from that fourth house to the 5th house in Capricorn. Of course, Pluto has been in your 5th house for years in Capricorn. So now Venus has joined there. And since Venus is in the 4th house for 5 days, I'll just mention what that could mean, which is something to do with money to buy a home, money from the sale of a home, money from your mother or family of origin in general. In the 5th house, Venus can be romantic. This is the house of creativity, of love. This is the house of pleasure. So anything that you're doing that has fun attached to it, or something that is a leisure activity, Venus enjoys this kind of thing. And you can find yourself, especially I would say with the arts, you might treat yourself to a play, an opera or something like that has a kind of a cultured side to it. But this can also be good for love. And on the same day, your ruler Mercury goes into Scorpio. So Mercury goes into the house that it rules. And that can really hit home the idea of learning something. Also, writing, that's a big one too, because the third house is all forms of communication. So, if some of you are thinking about starting a YouTube channel, the third house can be social media and media in general, if that's the type of work that you do. But this can be something where you're really, getting down to brass tacks when it comes to writing things. Perhaps you've been putting it off, and with Mercury retrograde, even rethinking things. It's funny, I have the moon in Virgo, and there are things that I'm going to get back into that have a writing connection to it. So now that I think about it, I usually don't listen to or watch forecasts that have to do with my moon sign, but I was reading something the other day and they said you should. I think in Vedic astrology, they recommend that women pay attention to their moon signs, especially. But I just saw something else, and I can't remember why they said or what exactly you're supposed to look for the moon sign. I think it had to do with, personal matters, your emotional state, and things like that. But to me, there's not much predictive stuff with that. So I would just talk about anything that has to do with domestic affairs. And, come to think about it, the moon rules that fourth house of home and family. So maybe it should have to do with homes. So, and also, yeah, so anything, and just in general, paying attention to the moon for creative matters as well. Yeah. Because I was saying for writing, if you're writing and you consider yourself a writer, this can also bring contracts into the forefront. And certainly during Mercury retrogrades, if a contract has some kind of problem attached to it, this can be a great time to rectify that. On the 19th, that lunar eclipse I was talking about is at 27 degrees of Taurus. So late degree of Taurus, that means that the sun is in the opposite sign and the same degree. So the sun is in that third house, opposing that lunar eclipse in the ninth house. The third and the ninth houses are houses that are connected to the mind. For the third house, it's more of the mundane mind. So it's more of the things that you learn in order to navigate this world. The ninth house is more abstract knowledge. It's more attached to wisdom, which transcends this world, but also it's the university level of learning. And you could really make a good point in saying that a lot of academic studies may not be practically applied. Yes, of course, there are certain courses of study that you have to do to get certified, like to become a teacher. But even when I was trying to become a teacher, it's like, I was like, when am I going to get one frigging course that teaches me how to teach? Because it was all this other crap, and especially nowadays, it's just like unbelievable, the kind of stuff that they're teaching, that's supposed to make somebody a good teacher. It's to me, it was a joke. So anyway, that kind of opposition is important because this is, what you're going to be experiencing in the next year and a half. And so for those of you who are, I was going to say on the younger side, but even like I went back to university when I was in my 30s. And so, some of you may be more quote unquote mature students. But the idea of, what is practical, what is something that I want to learn for the sake of learning, what is wisdom and what is knowledge. These kinds of things can come up. What about my mundane mind and my transcendental mind, or my local area and the big old world? Depending on other factors, you may be kind of torn between both of these areas, because a part of you may be attached to your local area and your neighborhood and things like that, and another part wants to explore the world, wants to expand your horizons. So this eclipse in Taurus is falling in that ninth house, and a lunar eclipse in the ninth can have, because this is like a powerful full moon, it may have more of an internalized effect, where it's kind of like a spiritual download, a revelation of sorts. By the way, when I said the word download, it was the time on this recording was 11:11, so that's pretty darn cool. And if another thing to note is that Uranus is transiting through Taurus, and it is in that same house. I mean, I'm just saying, and your mileage may vary for your personal chart, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just saying everybody's is in the same house. But the important thing about that is that in 2022, there's going to be another lunar eclipse, like a year from now, and it's going to form a conjunction with Uranus that is retrograding. That to me is a really amazing thing, because that conjunction could be like total instant freedom from something. Now, in the ninth house, if you are feeling the pangs of leaving and you feel like your heart is telling you you have to go and live somewhere else, like live in another country, but you still are feeling that pull to stay where you are, you might just like take off very suddenly. And I'm talking about a year from now. So that's pretty interesting. But anyway, this lunar eclipse could be making you realize about your concept of God and things like that, because the ninth house can be that. And for some Virgos, you may struggle with issues of being more in the mind and believing in things that are in the three-dimensional world, instead of kind of allowing yourself to put that aside and to imagine things that are not in the physical, but that you still want to make happen, or that you still want to believe in, and that it's not some kind of just wishful thinking. So that might come up as a theme for you, and this may be a breakthrough, like a spiritual breakthrough for you at this time. I think with Uranus in the same house, you're going to be introduced to unusual belief systems, philosophies of life, and some of these can be almost have a scientific angle to them, like even astrology is connected with the sign of Aquarius, so I assume Uranus is connected to that as well. But also, I would say, things that have to do with star seeds, galactic information. This kind of thing has a science fiction-y angle to it, and it might appeal to some Virgo people. Sometimes fantasy, like I was just talking to my partner, and he knows so much about the Lord of the Rings and the kind of thing, and I never, was into that at all. And sometimes it can allow people who are very who tend to be very realistic to kind of experience like a fantasy world, those kinds of books. And then they can just say, oh, that's fantasy. But then they find out that this magic, these things are really real, that the people who write these types of books, they're not just writing it so that you can escape into this imaginary world, but they're writing from experience or from what used to be, that they're channeling this reality that used to exist before we got more and more engrossed in the material dimension and the things of this world. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, lunar eclipse in Taurus. On the 21st, the sun goes into Sag, and on the 24th, Mercury goes into Sagittarius. And this is that domestic area, the fourth house. And again, with Mercury, there might be contracts if you're selling your house, if you're buying a house, and you have to negotiate and do all that stuff. And just, pay attention to the paperwork. We're still, you still have to do it. Like, even if Mercury goes direct, you still have to pay attention to your paperwork. But it can also be like maybe that third house activity is some Virgos studying to become a realtor and being able to sell houses. And now you're doing it. So it could be even something like that. But anyway, that's what I have for you, Virgo. I hope that you resonate with this. If you would like a private reading, I'm promoting my double readings because it's more substantial and it is a sale price. So you get a discount because they're two full-length readings. One is the chart analysis for an hour, and the other one's transits for an hour. You can find, that's called the deep dive reading. I have one where I combine it with a tarot reading called the whole enchilada, and other types of readings. So you can find out more information at the link below. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.